G'day guys, Mac with the Air Circle. Today, we're getting back into getting started in the Horus Heresy. What I want to look at today are the next steps forward that are sort of applicable to everyone. Now, this episode's going to be about the legions. Of course, I will look at Mechanicum in their own episode. And maybe Custodes. The problem with Militia and Solar Auxiliary is the range has been a little bit gutted. And it's also subject to a bit of change with things that have been coming in and out and previewed units. So I don't know that they'll each get their own individual episodes. I'll probably put them into a single episode to sort of explain what I think needs to be expanded in those forces. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at the HQ, Troops, Fast Attack, Elites, Heavy Support, and Lords of War of the Legions. And I'm going to give a few pointers about what I think is good or effective, what I think are good bundles to buy, what I think are good little combinations which will help you out, and of course what ones to avoid like the plague. So, first things first, HQs. If you're playing Ultramarines, the Damocles Command Rhino is a transport option for your Masters of Signals. For everyone else, it's a HQ option of its own. It's a non-compulsory HQ, can't be the Warlord, obviously, it's a bloody Rhino. It's not a bad choice. It gives you reliable deep strike with no scatter. Therefore, I found it very useful in games of 30k. If I've got a big Terminator deep strike going on, say you're playing forces that really benefit from Terminators like Sons of Horus, Death Guard, Dark Angels, maybe Iron Warriors or Iron Hands, forces who really excel with Terminators, and if you can bring them in via Deep Strike, perhaps with Rite of War, then the Damocles Command Rhino is worth its weight in gold, because it's giving you a 24-inch reliable no scatter radius around it. Kits-wise here, the Moritat is still not in a great place, so it's not necessarily a commander that I recommend to a lot of people. I think in the Raven Guard Legion forces, it's a very strong unit. And in the Blood Angels forces, with 20 Inferno pistols, it can kill vehicles. However, gotta remember, Inferno pistols, 6-inch range, 3-inch melter range. Very, very hard to get that close to a vehicle. So I can't recommend it to everyone for that reason. The Legion Vigilator works well with Legion Recon squads. Legion Recon squads, after the latest FAQ, are not in a terrible place, but they're not excelling either, because everything they bring to the table, for the legions you think would use them, like the Raven Guard or the Alpha Legion, they have some really viable alternatives of their own, which are better in a lot of ways. So yeah, it's a tough one. The Legion Praevian, on the other hand, is one I can pretty much recommend to every single Legion player. Having the option of bringing in a unit of Castellax or Vorax attached to one of your HQ choices, and remember, this is Heresy, so you've got 3 HQ options here. Being able to attach them to your Praevian is solid as hell. The Legion Champion and Master of Signals, of course, look, they're really niche units to get your money's worth. The Master of Signals really is best used to buff the ballistic skill of a heavy weapons unit. So unless you've invested in something like a las cannon squad, where you want that hitting on 2s with your las cannons, it's really hard to justify taking him, because he can't take any of the war gear that makes him the sort of character that can fight other characters. He's not taking, say, Power Fist, Terminator Armor, things like that make him really solid and survivable, as well as being a strong combatant. So, yeah, it's hard to justify it. The Legion Champion, well, yes, he does offer the versatility of a higher weapon skill and a Paragon Blade, and I think in the low points games, it's definitely got its strengths, or just being used as a stock Centurion model. However, the Legion Champion doesn't give you any sort of army-wide benefits or other buffs. So things like a Master of the Forge, who can take a lot of similar war gear, has access to all this Tech Marine stuff like rad grenades, thunder hammers, servo harnesses that make them just solid as hell, are probably a better champion unit, especially for something like Iron Hands or Iron Warriors. They're a better champion unit than the champion in a lot of cases, so hard to recommend the champion too often. Perhaps if you're a Dark Angels player and you're using a Tyrannic Greatsword, yeah, champion could be pretty handy. Going in and just chopping down monstrous creatures with one hit, yeah, great, but that's very Legion specific. The Mark III and Mark IV command sets, it's a tough one. The Mark IV one is hard to modify due to the cloaks over the shoulders. You basically just have to remove that entire arm and cut it away. You will struggle to modify the arm with the cloak on. Usually you just have to replace it with a completely different shoulder and arm. Not terrible, not great either. The best part about the kits is probably the banner. It gives you the option of making a herald for your legion or making a command squad with it. It's a tough call, but when it comes to command squads, and take this from a White Scars player, command squads on bikes are incredibly points inefficient because you have to pay a whole bunch of extra points for a command squad because they're all characters and they're all wearing artificer armor. Well, the problem is when you give them a Scimitar jet bike, it gives them a 2+ save anyway. But they don't take away the cost of the artificer armor from the jet bike. Instead, you've got to pay full points for the bike and the armor on top of them. So they end up being an incredibly expensive unit for what they bring to the board. So a command squad on foot is the only time I really would suggest these banners. And it's really, really rough trying to say you should not take a Terminator command squad or such, but that also runs into the same problems. Because it is probably the better version of the command squad. But then they also suffer from the fact you've got to pay for the Terminator armor. So, yeah. That's pretty much it for my suggestions on HQs. Yes, there is a last option here, and that is the 2 Praetors in the top center of the screen, where one is in Terminator armor. I generally avoid this model because the hands are swapped back to front compared to other Terminators. That makes converting it a bit of a pain in the ass unless you're pretty confident with your conversions. Generally, I will suggest using a character series model, like Abaddon or Tython, and modifying them slightly, or perhaps using something from another range like Wolf Huron's model or Asteria Moloch, these sort of things to really create a character that stands out. Or, the simplest way of all, getting a hold of an additional version of your Legion's own special Terminators, like Gorgons or something like that, and modifying them, like a Gorgon Terminator with a servo harness, something like that, in order to make them really stand out as a character in your Legion. Alright, HQs. That's one of the bigger categories to go through, because there's a lot of consoles in that. I've tried to condense it down. Let's move on to troops. Assault squads are generally a shithouse. I often avoid them. If you're playing the Blood Angels with the Day of Revelation, they can be quite good. Dark Angels, with their sword bonuses, they can be alright. And same with World Eaters, if they're running around chain axes, they can be alright. That's using your Legion strengths. Nothing wrong with that. If you are doing that, my suggestion is, since you don't have Fury of the Legion or anything like that, and you are relying entirely on your attacks in close combat, you need a way of buffing those attacks. You do need to invest in the chain axes. You do need to invest in a Legion that buffs their assault marines. Otherwise, going into combat, hitting on 4s, wounding on 4s, the enemy saves on 3s, that's, well, half your attacks hit, only half of that wounds, so a quarter of what you started with, and they're going to save 2/3 of that. It's essentially a pillow fight. It's rough. And if you want your assault marines to survive long enough to even get into that fight, you really need to invest in apothecaries to join the squad. So, when it comes to expanding your force, I would say assault squads are not where I would go to. And despoiler squads are an irrelevant unit. If you've got a bunch of plastic marines from Betrayal at Kelth or something, they come with close combat weapons in the kit, just glue them onto the back of the marine's armor, ta-da, they got their close combat weapon, they got their bolt pistol, they got their bolt gun. completely WYSIWYG and legal. The Legion Recon squad, as I said earlier, suffers those same problems. I don't highly rate it as a unit. I think it's okay, unless you're running something like a Recon Rite of War. Not the greatest unit. Legion Breaches, about the only one here who come into their own, and Legion Breaches, obviously in Zone Mortalis, are going to be great. But if you play the right Legion in a regular game of 30k, something like 1000 Suns, and you buff the invul saves on the unit, they can become absolutely rock hard as nails. So, used wisely, breaches are worth it. However, things to avoid. The Las Cutter. Never, ever, ever, ever arm the squad with a Las Cutter. You're pissing away your points. And Graviton guns, unless you confidently feel you're going to be sitting still shooting at the enemy, avoid them. I prefer to sculpt them or model them onto my units because I think they look cool, but as a weapon on that unit, it's rough. Apart from that, that's really all the upgrades you're looking at. Apart from if you want something like Beaky Marines or Heresy Armored Marines. Alright, elites. So, destroyers. The only legion I think really gets their money's worth out of destroyers is still the Raven Guard. Yes, things like Blood Angels, Day of Revelation, that sort of thing, you can get some decent bonuses. If you're running a Drop Assault Vanguard, something like that, again. But Raven Guard, the option of infiltrating them, coming with Furious Charge and Rad Grenades, so, wounding enemy Marines on 2s in close combat. It's a tough one. So, Legion Destroyers overall, I still wouldn't recommend them for a lot of legions. The Space Marine Rapier Quad Mortar, it's strong for every legion. It's that simple. The Quad Heavy Bolter, I would limit it to Dark Angels and Iron Warriors only. Because Dark Angels get acid rounds, which I believe they can use with it. If they can't, then what's even the point of having Quad Heavy Bolter rapiers? And yeah, obviously the Iron Warriors, I suggest it because their heavy bolters can take pinning ammunition. Pinning is not a huge rule in Heresy because there's so much stuff with Leadership 9 and 10, but it could be handy, especially if you're fighting low leadership units. The Graviton Cannon I've discussed previously. It can be used as a fantastic delaying tactic. You can completely bog down Death Stars that cost 1,000 points with just a unit of 2 or 3 of these. That said though, you've got to know what you're doing with it, and I did a whole video discussing that previously. Tank Marines, avoid. Only use the models as Master of the Forge HQ options, because Tech Marines overall are pretty bad. Space Marine Apothecaries, on the other hand, are fantastic no matter who they're attached to. And of course, Contemptors, don't leave home without one, unless you're playing White Scars and you're all on jet bikes because Sagamazan for the Kargan. Contemptors are reliable as hell. Now, there are obviously a different range of Contemptors. You've got your Mortis, you've got your Standards, and you've also got your Cortus Dreadnaughts. Now, the Cortus ones lose a little bit in sort of the armor department and the saves department, but they make up for it by having this weird reactor that buffs them in exchange for the possibility of losing hull points, which in my experience very rarely happens. So, reliable options all around from Contemptors. But you have an armor 13 unit, which means immune to marine crack grenades, immune to strength 6. That's huge in the Heresy meta, and especially with Demons of the Ruinstorm, Power Fist armed Contemptors, Kyria's Assault Cannon armed Contemptors, they're really going to come into their own. Alright, fast attack. Getting through this pretty fast, guys. Proteus Patton Land Speeders. Pretty mediocre as fuck. It's very hard to justify the unit beyond the rule of cool, the old Rogue Trader aesthetic. Yeah, okay, they can take things like Volkites, they can take Cyclone Missiles, Hunter Killers, there's a few different things you can do with them. I think their best use is probably something revolving around Volkites and Graviton guns, because Graviton guns are reliably taking off points of armor, and Volkites just have a sheer output of firepower, and you can really harass the flanks of your enemies. That's about it on that unit. The Javelins, on the other hand, phenomenally good units. The Armor 11 buff on the front makes them immune to frontal bolter fire. Very strong. The Cyclone missile pods on the sides give them a lot of firepower, and I prefer to arm the driver with a multi-melter. So what that means is I have a threat factor on my speeders, and the enemy can't ignore them because they know that if they let me get too close, I have a reliable anti-armor weapon, or I can sit there at 24 inches plinking off Terminators. They don't want that, so they focus a lot more firepower than is really deserved at my Javelins. And I will jink them and all sorts of things in order to get them to survive. Very, very good unit, and points-wise, very efficient unit. The Storm Eagle. In the right lists, it is fantastic, giving you an aerial transport platform. And in most regular games, you have a vehicle which has a 25 model capacity with an incredible amount of firepower. And of course, the way to use it is use your las cannons and multi-melter against a vehicle, or heavy infantry like Terminators, something like that. Use your Machine Spirit to split fire your 2 Strength 5 AP4 templates off at some other cunt, because that's hilarious. But the dollars you're seeing on the screen is the sort of points you're paying for the unit. So choose wisely, and remember, it's not coming until turn 2 at least in the game, and other flyers are going to be devastating against it, because it is only an armor 12 flyer. Even if it does have armored ceramite built into it, it's really best used as a big transport option. If you're going to be using it as a gunboat, there are much better options out there. The Scimitar Patton jet bikes, fantastic unit to pick. Whether you use them as a heavy support option, so they're all armed with multi-melters, all armed with plasma cannons, or all armed with Volkites, all solid options. The fast attack slots, though, the fast attack slots are usually a lot less fought over than the heavy support slots are. So generally, I will recommend people take their Legion Scimitars in the fast attack slot. Legions like the Raven Guard get Furious Charge with them. World Eaters, of course, you can take Chain Axes on them, I believe. I have to double check that, actually. I'm pretty sure they have the option. They don't get bonus attacks, though, but they can take the actual Chain Axe. So, yeah, used wisely, strong unit, and they're pretty efficient on points. The Outriders, on the other hand, I cannot logically suggest to people to take. Yeah, they're just way, way, way over points for what they offer. I shouldn't be having to pay with a twin-linked plasma gun something in the region of 70-odd points for the unit. It's just stupid. The Hyperios launcher, the defense missile launcher on the right, don't take them. They're low range, shit ballistic skill, struggle to pick out targets. They're crap. Spend the same amount of points and buy a flyer. What's not pictured for some reason with Forge World's fantastic website, where you select fast attack as an option, is things like the Xiphon and the Lightning. Well, both of which are very common fighters to see. So what do they offer? The Xiphon offers you a couple of las cannon shots and a couple of pretty reliable sundering missile shots, which will really kill power armor and can hurt a lot of vehicles just below sort of that Land Raider level. It's very expensive for what it offers. It does come with like the armored cockpit, the chaff launchers, that sort of thing, but I honestly think the go-to is just the Lightning for people. If they want to get the most points efficiency and not the rule of cool, for me the rule of cool is the Xiphon, that's why it's in my white scars. But for points efficiency it's the Lightning, usually with Kraken penetrators, so you fly on, you've got 4 missiles that do armor bane shots. A very strong alpha strike option against things like Leviathans and Land Raiders. And don't ask me why Forge World doesn't have them listed in their fast attack options. It's just something to do with their shitty algorithms. And it's happened before where you'll go into an army and sometimes they won't have their Primarch or a squad of Terminators or something like that under their unit options. It's stupid. Alright, this is going to be the hardest slog out of all of them. Heavy support. Spartan Assault Tank. If you don't have a Death Star, why are you taking it? It has a lot of firepower compared to a Land Raider, but it also costs almost twice as much as a Land Raider. So you're probably better off with just 2 Land Raiders for the same sort of points. And you'll get slightly more firepower by taking 2 Land Raiders. That said, if you have a 10-man squad of Terminators with an Apothecary or another character attached to them you need to transport, the Spartan is the way to do it. If you are batshit insane and you have a 20-man squad of tactical marines with apothecaries and characters, like you're a World Eaters player and you just want to throw them at the enemy, yeah, it could be a fun way of doing that too. That's really all it has to offer. It is not a gun tank. You can abide in squadrons. That's pretty much its only uses. The Leviathan Dreadnaught. Okay, so the Leviathan Dreadnaught. What has he got to offer? In the way of shooting, not much. The Gravflux Bombard is fantastic against infantry. I believe the intent from its rules was to make it good against vehicles, but against vehicles, it rolls 3d6 armor pen. The average roll on 3d6, I believe, is 11. 10 to 11, which is glancing Rhinos. Yeah, well, Heresy's full of armor 13 and 14 and 15 vehicles, or equivalent, because of flare shields, and the Gravflux Bombard ain't gonna do shit against any of that, so yeah. Can't suggest that weapon. The autocannon options for the Leviathan are really going to be good against Demons of the Ruin Storm. Toughness 4 demons, it's got strength 8 AP3 autocannons. So you do the maths, it's gonna kill lesser demons very fast, it's gonna kill militia very fast. Very solid options. If you're gonna do it, you'd take 2 of them. Turn your Leviathan into a total gunboat. Otherwise, I generally run my Leviathans as a close combat dreadnought with 1 core and 1 wrecker. So that way it gets 2d6 pen against fortifications, vehicles, other dreadnoughts. And it also gets the choppy core, which gives it d3 wounds for each wound caused in close combat. A fantastic option to take on a Leviathan dreadnought if you're going to be fighting someone, because the gun-armed Leviathans are almost the costs of knights, in which case you may as well just invest in a knight. The Predators. It's hard to justify squadrons of Predators. If you're playing maybe Iron Wings, something like that, Armoured Spearhead, yeah, okay, but in general, there aren't a lot of upgrades that are very efficient for Predators, and there are a lot of las cannons and the equivalent floating around in the Heresy, especially haywire weapons. The fact that Predators don't have any way of negating incoming frontal damage, they're relying entirely on that front armor of 13, and they've got that weak side armor and terrible rear armor. Yeah, it's rough to play them in squads, and the money investment, the amount of dollars you have to spend, or pounds, or francs, or whatever your currency of choice is, coconuts and swallows, it's really hard to justify them beyond the rule of cool, because they look fantastic to put a squadron of Predators on the tabletop. And then, of course, the first one gets hit by a couple of las cannons, and the explosions chain reaction and carry over to the other vehicles, and the whole squadron goes up in flames, and it's your turn 1, and you haven't even used them yet. Depressing as fuck. The Legion Sicaran battle tank, on the other hand, that gives you some great options. The Sicaran is like, hey, I've got the side armor the Predators lack. I've got the rear armor the Predators lack. I have twice the speed. I have much stronger weaponry. Why would you ever take Predators? That's all it comes down to. It is so much superior. The Legion Sicaran Omega Tank Destroyer. I can't ever suggest taking it beyond the rule of cool, because the rules are terrible. It's probably about 40 to 50 points more expensive than it needs to be for what it brings to the table. What it brings to the table is half a dozen plasma shots at 24 inches, in which case you can buy a squad of Marines that can shoot 24 inches of plasma guns for about half the points, or you can fire a single las cannon equivalent shot at 24 inches. And remember, these are sort of like gets hot and that sort of thing. It's just bad. The Charybdis, this gives me a good chance to segue into another unit that's missing from the fast attack, which is the Dreadclaw. Dreadclaw and Charybdis are a great way of getting things like Legion Tactical Support Squads, that's your melter gun unit, plasma gun unit, whatever, into a position where they can effectively target the enemy. Because they're flyers, you deep strike them in, they have reliable deep strike, and you can fly them up to the point where you want to disembark. Okay, solid choice. But expensive, big hunks of resin, lots of parts, pain in the ass to assemble. The Charybdis Assault Corps roughly is the size of a basketball. Roughly. It's a big model. A little bit flimsy too. It's the sort of one where you got to pin it a lot. You want to hold it together with 2-part epoxy resin, not super glue unless you're insane. It's a rough one to justify. Some legions will definitely get a lot more value out of it. Something like the Raven Guard doing drop assaults or Sons of Horus. Yeah, great. But for the majority of players, I can't suggest the Charybdis as a viable option. And do remember, you're spending like 300 points on a 5-hull point drop pod, basically. Alright, the Land Raider variants. The Land Raider Armoured Proteus and Proteus, Mark 2B, and, well, it depends what you want out of them. If you want something that has a couple of las cannons, Armour 14, comes in a squadron, they're great. But the Mark 2B Land Raider is the only one that's going to give you that assault ramp to allow you to charge out of it. But the Proteus is the one that gives you Explorator Augury arrays, which buff your reserves, slow down enemy reserves. It's a real catch-22. I think they're both viable options, but again, a lot of points to play to put on the battlefield. So unless you're playing a list like Armored Breakthrough or Iron Wing Protocols, it's really hard to justify bringing in a bunch of Land Raiders. You'll probably get more money's worth out of investing in Sigaram battle tanks for your heavy supports. There is one Land Raider I can suggest, which passes all the tests with flying colours, and that's the Achilles Alpha Patton Land Raider. Holy fuck is this thing good. Having used it at Active Heresy, every single person who played against it went, Jesus Christ, that thing is good. You can fire sundering strength 8 shells off the top of my head, like 48 inches or something ridiculous, 36 inches with that quad mortar. The quad mortar firepower is just amazing. I don't go for the multi-melters. I think they're a waste on this vehicle. Going in with 2 twin-link multi-melter shots is pathetic. I'd rather just have a pintle multi-melter. Instead, I take the Volkites on the sponsons. You can shoot 8 twin-linked shots from your Volkites at 42 inches, which are strength 6, AP 5 with def liberate. Combined with the quad mortar itself, this thing devastates hordes of infantry. And, as Adrian, good friend of mine, found out when we played at Act, it will devastate even Terminators just through the sheer weight of numbers hitting them. With strength 8 shells coming in from the quad mortar, it basically means that if you don't roll your 2+ save, and yeah, they get their 2+ save, you're not getting feel no pain. Unless you're maybe an Iron Hands player, who's -1 to the strength of incoming shells. But essentially, it meant I was just instant-killing his Sekhmet Terminators and his Iron Warriors, Tyrants, and that sort of thing that was in his force. So, really strong unit. And the fact that you can't get the lance hits against it, you can't get the 2d6 armor pens against it because of that reinforced ceramite. Oh boy, is the Achilles Alpha Land Raider really hard to take down. He hull-pointed one pretty much to death through using las cannons from Spartan and Land Raider combined. It took everything he had from shooting for about 4 turns straight, and was still on the table. So, yeah, Achilles Alpha Land Raider is definitely one I can suggest to pretty much every Legion player. You will get your points investment back. The Legion Medusa and Legion Basilisk. If you're playing Iron Warriors, especially if you're playing the Rite of War, which is very artillery focused, yeah, you can get your money's worth out of this. And that's pretty much it. For everyone else, they can be quite difficult to employ, and employ wisely. The Basilisk is really hampered by its gun being best effective at super long ranges, and most fighting on the tabletop happens within 24 inches. So, it's a rough one. I'd probably suggest taking the Medusa over the Basilisk. It's probably a better investment of points, but not one I can suggest for everyone. The Legion Deredeo Dreadnaught. Alright, so you've got a plasma option, an autocannon option, and a las cannon option. If you want to destroy aircraft and tanks with impunity, the las cannons are definitely the option. The Arachnus Heavy las cannon is a brutal weapon. As armed on screen right now, fantastic for killing flyers and tanks. For that reason, it will make a lot of my recommended lists as your anti-air / anti-tank option in heavy support. The plasma version is probably the least efficient of the three. If perhaps with an antimatic Paves, rolling forward with Terminators or Tactical Support Marines and giving an area effect buff of invulnerable save, as well as firing plasma shots at the enemy, you can probably get some effectiveness out of it. The autocannon one is really good at dealing with mid-level flyers, mid-level tanks, and of course the rounds are strength 8, so you can deal with things like toughness 4 infantry, giving them instant kills. All three are good, but I've really come to get a soft spot for the heavy las cannons. Obviously another version of the Predator there, let's just ignore that, we've covered it. The Legion Deimos Patton Whirlwind. Very strong unit. This is the, if you haven't moved, you fire D3+1 small blasts, which are strength 8 AP3. Yeah, very strong unit. Has slowly sort of lost ground with the arrival of the Sicaran Arcus. Obviously, quad rapiers being everywhere and being an elite's choice, not a heavy choice, has sort of moved this machine to the side, but it definitely still has a place. Still a very, very dangerous weapon. You'll discount a Whirlwind when it's a strength 5 AP4 blast coming at you, which is one of the heavy support options. It's either that, the Basilisk, or the Medusa. They all occupy the same slot, and you can only get one squadron of identical vehicles and never take the Whirlwind. This one, on the other hand, dumping 4 small blasts will basically disintegrate a unit from existence of power-armoured Marines. So, solid choice. Definitely a solid choice. The drawback is you can only have a squadron of 1, and heavy support is often a place where you can spend a lot of points or fills up fast, and it makes it hard to choose it every time. Moving across, we have the Deimos Vindicator Laser Destroyer. My Thousand Suns has 3 of them, and they have always done sterling work. The option of sacrificing hull points, practically, to fire a bajillion shots. We're talking 3 shots, strength 9, 36-inch range with ordnance rule, and I think they're AP1. AP1 or 2, but I'm pretty sure AP1. From the Laser Destroyer array means that I can put out 9 shots, which will pretty much cripple any vehicle short of a Flare Shield Spartan, and even then has not bad odds against that. Because remember, you're rolling 2d6 for the pen, picking the highest result. And on 9 shots, you're going to get a decent amount of 5s and 6s. As I said, the Flare Shield is going to negate it to just 6s hull pointing, but hey, that's as tough as it gets in the Heresy. Really good at killing squads of Terminators as well, I've discovered. Turning these shots on infantry is hilarious. So, yeah. Vindicator Laser Destroyer. Well worth the money. The Vindicator Demolisher Cannon shells are worth it. If I had to choose between this and the Medusa, well, Medusa has an extra 12 inches of range. Has indirect fire, but the Deimos Patton Vindicator has better armor. It's a tough call. I'd probably go the Vindicator though, especially because it takes a squadron. The Basilisks and the Medusas, of course, can take squadrons as well, but they're a 0 to 1 choice, whereas the Vindicator is not. You could fill 9 of these into a heavy support if you were so desiring, or if you're an Iron Warriors player, you can take, I believe, 4 heavy supports. So you could take 12 of them, and it would only cost you probably like 1,500 points to do it, and it would be hilarious. So it's an option. Deathstorm drop pods, I don't recommend them. They're poo. Even with like Raven Guard, something like that, the firepower they put out is just, it's just too low. They don't put out enough firepower to justify their points. The Assault Cannons variant, I don't even think you can take in 30k, so I'm not sure why it's there. Assault Cannons are an upgrade choice for anything that can take a heavy flamer for Blood Angels, but Death Storms don't have a heavy flamer option, so unless I'm missing something here, that's not a legal 30k unit. I don't know why that makes their page, but things like Dreadcore drop pods don't. So, good work on your algorithms there, Forge World. That takes us supposedly to the end of heavy support, but again it's not, because we're missing a couple of units thanks to Forge World's algorithms. We've got Legion, in this case Dark Angels, heavy support. We're missing the Sikaran Arcus and the Sikaran Punisher, and the Sikaran Venator, the Tank Destroyer. So let's discuss those 3 now. The Arcus, pretty much the most broken. You should take one in every list vehicle in the game. Even over a lot of Custodia vehicles. You're getting armor 13, 12, 12 platform, moves 12 inches, it has missiles that can instant kill mechanic and monstrous creatures, it has missiles which can kill aircraft, it has missiles that absolutely mess up infantry and Terminators, it has missiles which are really good at killing with walkers. It's basically a jack of all trades, and it does it for the same sort of points as the Sikaran Omega does. And that's, once you've upgraded it, it is cheaper than the Sikaran Omega with its stupid plasmas. So the Arcus, that's the one that looks like it's got a Whirlwind turret on a Sikaran body. Yeah, take one. The Sikaran Punisher. Arm it with the Punisher, of course. You can take him in squadrons now, which is brutal. You can also arm it with heavy bolter sponsons if you're playing as Iron Warriors. I would suggest making those pinning sponsons because you've just got the sheer weight of firepower, which is pretty strong. Definitely a worthy investment, especially if you need to deal with hordes, because 2 of those in a squadron, you're paying like 400 points, and you're putting out 36 strength 5 or 6 AP 5 shots, as well as a shitload of heavy bolter shots, probably another 18 heavy bolter shots. Yeah, really strong. Just for drowning someone in bullets like orcs would. Also, the Sikaran Venator has a neutron laser, which if it pens its target, I believe it means that that target can only snap fire the next turn, which makes it brilliant against anything that has ordnance weapons or template weapons. So it's a natural hard counter to a lot of other vehicles, because a lot of vehicles come with template weapons. Very strong and effective against super heavies as well, it's worth pointing out. It can just shut down a lot of their shooting. It's a Typhon Hunter. The weapon options on it, I would not suggest las cannons, because the neutron laser is better than las cannons, and if you fire the neutron laser, it's an ordnance weapon, which means all your las cannons only become snap firing. And you're only going to have 2 las cannons anyway on it, so not worth it. Instead, heavy bolters. So that way you've at least got a backup of lots of DACA if the main gun goes down. That should cover heavy support. Alright, last but not least, try and round this video out in the next 10 minutes or so. Lords of War. The Macedon is about 300 points more expensive than it should be. Don't take it. The only way to make a Macedon worthwhile on the battlefield is to fill it full of Tech Marines and Master the Forge and try and repair the thing as quickly as it goes down in hull points. The Legion Falchion, or Fellblade, for example, has more hull points than the Macedon does. And the Legion Typhon siege tank has a reinforced hull, and despite the fact that it's only about as big as the rear track assembly on the Macedon, it for some reason gets crushing weight rule, which means that due to its reinforced body, it gets better thunder blitzers and is better at ramming other tanks. And in a ramming competition, the Typhon siege tank, the size of the rear tracks on the Macedon, is better at ramming than the Macedon. It makes no fucking sense. So Macedon is a void, especially because it's just got no firepower. It's got 2 heavy flamers and 2 las cannons. That massive melter gun on the front is only, I think, 6 inches range. It's something pathetic. With 6-inch, with 3-inch small blasts, 4 of, with the stone burner special rules. They do a shitload of hull points to buildings. Any pen becomes like D3 hull points or something. But yeah, overall pathetic. It's alright with the augury array on top. The anti-air array suffers from the problem that most anti-air does in Heresy, which is it's not AP2, so you can't just instantly blow up flyers. You have to do a shitload of hull points to them. Mostly it just stuns enemy flyers if it gets through, and they might not harass you as much for a turn. That's about it. The Sokar Patton Stormbird and the Thunderhawk. Don't take either of these, unless, rule of cool, you think it would look great to put on the tabletop. But here's the problem. They don't really fit on the tabletop. You can see a Thunderhawk gunship on the landing pad in that top right picture. That's a 2x2 section of board. Look how much space it takes up. Now imagine trying to put this thing on a tabletop on a stand flying in the air amongst buildings and trees and all the other units you've got in the game and hoping it doesn't fall off and smash and obliterate itself and everything on the table. Don't take them. Just don't. They look great in a display cabinet, and that is all you'll be able to use them for. And why are you pissing away all this money on a display case item? That's pretty much what my Macedon does, and I regret it in a lot of ways. Okay. Legion Falchion Super Heavy Tank Destroyer. I can't recommend it. It's a better option than the Baneblade, or the Shadow Sword, I should say. It comes with 2 volcano cannons. If you roll a 1 on the D table, it does nothing. And that's pretty much its saving grace, is that, yeah, it's got a volcano cannon. Honestly, Legion Fellblade is better. The Fellblade has an 120-inch, 5-inch blast, crazy strong anti-tank round. Basically a demolisher cannon that can fire 120 inches. In fact, I think it might even be the small blast, the 3-inch one. But anyway, Fellblade, 120-inch range with that thing. The fact that it can fire massive blasts with its main guns and has demolisher cannon, heavy bolters, a bunch of quad lattice cannons. It has a power output, which is much better for you. Very good at killing infantry. It's better than the volcano cannon shots. So, Fellblade over the Falchion, but Falchion does have a certain rule of cool about it. If they improved volcano cannon rules somewhat, so that they always guaranteed to get something decent on the D table, as befits them. I mean, I've rolled ones before with the Tormentor Perturabo's personal transport, and just queefed against a unit, and that was depressing as fuck. So, there's that. The Legion Glaive, very strong option, highly recommended. Very good at anti-infantry, mediocre at anti-vehicle, but a fun unit, and giant Volkites are cool. Typhon Heavy Siege Tank, a lot of people who take them in pairs, because you can take 2 for 1 Lord of War slot. They're broken, underpointed, overpowered, talking a Strength 10, AP1, massive blast, 7-inch blast, and you can't take cover saves against it. So someone rocks up with 2 of these and proceeds to just delete everything on the board edge opposite. And if you do manage to blow one up, they blow up in some crazy explosion which kills the shit you sent to blow it up in the first place. Good times. The Cerberus is terrible. The main gun gets D3 neutron laser shots. That's an average of 2, which is the same as the Sikaran Venator. That's dumb. It's very dumb, in fact. Yeah, I can't suggest it. It's got the high armor value, but it is a super heavy. When you blow it up, it's worse for your own guys, and it has a rule where if it doesn't pen with that main gun, it actually takes a hull point off itself. So, Iron Hands with Castro North, maybe. Otherwise, yeah, compared to the Typhon, it's a piece of shit, and the Venator basically does the same job. You could buy 2 Venators for the same points as Cerberus, and you're going to get more shots and more reliable, consistent firepower. I'd just take the Venators. Okay, so there's a couple of more units right before I wrap up that have just been left off here. They're used to be super heavies, they've been FAQ'd to now be tanks, and that's the Melkadors. And I'm not sure why, when we go into our heavy support section, they're not here, but we'll try and find them now. So let's see. Melkador. And we're talking Melkador with Battle Cannon, or the Melkador with Demolish Cannon. You can take a Demolish Cannon, I believe, in the hull on the Melkador with the Battle Cannon. That is a Legion heavy support choice. Pretty much no one takes them. If they were still a super heavy vehicle, people would, because at least if it blows up, there's a chance of crippling a bunch of enemies, but it's a bit strange. It's a super heavy vehicle, which is smaller than things like the Spartan and Land Raider. They're quite long, but they're pretty short and pretty narrow vehicles. Yeah, they're sort of emulating the old World War I Mark IV heavy tank, that sort of thing. I can't really suggest Melkadors. I really can't. At least the Infernus had that ridiculous super flamethrower, and the Venator version, the one which has the neutron laser, the Veldor, I believe it's called. They're pretty good in like a Solar Auxiliary Army. In fact, I have a couple of them sitting in a box behind me. I have a whole Solar Auxiliary Army here. I don't know if I'll ever build it, because I've lost the enthusiasm for that force. Yeah, but Legions aren't getting access to those variants. They're getting the Battle Cannon variant, and frankly, it's competing with so many good options in the heavy support category, you just don't see them. So anyway, I hope this has been informative. I've had to just machine gun through and rattle off 1,000 names and stats in really quick order off the top of my head. But hopefully people got something out of this episode if they're looking at expanding their forces. The best advice I can honestly give is, for every sort of 500 points you go up in your army, try and put in a troops unit or a scoring unit. Now that means something like Terminators. Legion Terminators have scoring. Legion Veteran Tactical Squads have scoring. Legion Tactical Support Squads are a support troops choice and are scoring. So if you can work some scoring units in to every 500 points, you're going to be well looked after. Because if you get 2 every 1,000 points, when you're playing sort of your 3,000 points games, you're going to have 6 scoring units, and 6 is a pretty fair amount of scoring units. More would be ideal, of course, but if you've got 6 scoring units, that still means the rest of your army can be delivering a lot of killing power. It's never a good thing to just go, I'm taking just 2 scoring units, like 2 tactical squads, and I'm just going to wing it from there. It works out really, really badly in objective games. Some other things I haven't explored here was Rhinos and drop pods, and Dreadnaught drop pods. Dreadnaught drop pods are great. You are paying for a slot to take them in often, but you can reliably deliver Dreadnaughts to the front line. And walking across from your side of the board to the other side is the surest way to lose a Dreadnaught. Being able to deliver them into the enemy, very, very good. Makes them an immediate threat that has to be dealt with, and people don't always have the solution to it, especially if it's a Leviathan. The downside of that, of course, is you're not taking them in squadrons anymore, or talons as they're known, which is rough. The Rhino, on the other hand, very, very low on armor and a great way of handing out first blood to your opponent. But you can quickly and rapidly move your units around the tabletop. Something like the Ruinstorm Demon Rifts I was talking about yesterday. If you can quickly get a Rhino up to there, dump your squad out, surround the rift, you can cut off any reinforcements from coming through it. That's tactical gameplay. And, of course, regular drop pods. You're only taking those with certain rights of war, and of course, certain rights of war work better for some legions than others. Raven Guard, Blood Angels, they like drop pods. World Eaters, they like drop pods. Armies which are really strong in close combat love their drop pods. Whereas armies like Ultramarines, for example, I don't know that I'd want my superior tactical squads jumping out of them. Maybe something like Invictus Suzerain would be scary coming out of them, but that's about it. So anyway, I hope you've found this informative and helpful. I do apologise for the fact that Forge World's website is shit and doesn't know what tanks and units belong in the different Force Org slots, but I'm sure all the money that the hobby community is pumping into them is ensuring that this website will get better with time. I doubt it. Anyway, thank you all for watching the episode, and I'll see you all next time. Wait, don't go anywhere, stop the presses. That dodgy algorithm of Forge Worlds, where units don't show up, or if they've gone out of resin production into plastic production, that sort of thing, and how they don't have their bundles visible, and all sorts of weirdness with their website, means that we're missing the Kestis, Legion Terminators, despite the fact I spoke about Legion Terminators in the episode, and Castiferum Dreadnaughts. Yeah, sorry guys. I noticed during editing that these things were missing, and I thought to myself, hang on a minute, I recognise more units should be in here. And yeah, more units should be in there. That's not even to include things like Legion Seekers, which didn't even make the cut in the episode, so sorry, my apologies. Alright, Kestis Assault Ram, great heavy support option, only transports 10 models, but it's solid as a rock, counts as a tank, can ram things, has a very good main gun in that Magna Melter. Very viable unit, good luck buying them because they're not in production currently, even though they have rules in the Heresy. Alright, Terminators. We get two different flavours of Legion Terminator. The Cataphracti boys and the Tartarus boys. It's down to your preferences. Cataphracti can't overwatch. They're slow and purposeful for all intents and purposes. So no running, things like that. Can't chase down enemies in close combat, but they have a 4+ invul, whereas the Tartarus have a 5+ invul, but can overwatch, they can run. So it's your preference. Do you want mobility or survivability? If you're coming in a drop pod or riding in a tank transport, something like that, you'll probably get away with Cataphracti. But if you've got a foot socket somewhat across the board, you're playing Zone Mortalis maybe, something like that, Tartarus is usually the better choice. It's entirely up to the person building the army. And in Dominus Patton, that's the 40k style of Terminator armor. Is a legitimate armor to take in the Heresy. However, I will just say for my own intents and purposes, I don't want to see lazy cunts just using their 40k models with Crux Terminatus and all that 40k iconography on them. If you want to use them in 30k, I'm perfectly fine with it, but make them look like they belong in the time period. Maybe swap out the helmets for something a little more Heresy-like, instead of the 40k style in Dominus, because the armor was slightly different back then. A great example of which is, look at Tipperus the Red Wake. His armor styling is very much the 30k style of Indominus. That's the original style. The helmet is very much like a Mark V power armor helmet. And then, of course, the box Dreadnaught has access to a few weapons the Contemptors don't. Things like the Redeemer Flame Cannon, so Strength 6 AP3 super heavy flamer. That thing's very handy. Honestly, these guys, I like to use them in my Thousand Suns as an anti-air option. I run Mortis variant with 2 twin-linked missile launchers for its arms and 2 hunter-killer missiles, or what's the Chaos Frag missile launcher thing. The little one. I always forget what it's called. The Havoc launcher. I run those on it as well. So it gives you a few options of what you can take. The box Dreadnaughts are cheaper than Contemptors, probably overpriced for what they deliver, but you can take them in Talons of 3 if they're not the Mortis. That's the shooting variant. Talons of 3 of them kitted out for close combat and something like Zone Mortalis you can do for very cheap, and they're surprisingly effective. Anyway, I hope this more thoroughly finishes off the episode, and I do apologise for taking this on at the end, but as I said, Forge World's website currently is just shitty. It's just laid out shitty. A lot of units that should be in certain Force Org sections when you select them are just not there. And they're in production too. Things like the Dreadclaw. Why wasn't that in Fast Attack? Reasons. And you know what? No one's going to say that's a problem. Work that out. Thank you all for watching. See you all next.